I feel like it's super buzzy to talk about whether or not to-do lists work, so it only makes sense to talk about that on a show all about time, right? So hello, this is Melissa Dillon, and I am your host here on Have More Time, a show brought to you by Raising Kindness, and I am so looking forward to today's episode. But first, I have to tell you in this intro that we are all about family here. We're all about parents and helping you to achieve a life that you love with your loved ones and your kids. So I can't wait to dive in today with you. So to-do lists can be super dreading and overwhelming, especially if they're the never-ending chicken scratch paper with a whole bunch of stuff that you've written down on it, and you crossed it out, and then you rewrite it, and then you cross some more stuff out, and you rewrite it. Does that sound familiar? I know that that's a similar way that I used to do things and handle a lot of my own tasks, and I can tell you I felt so drained and overwhelmed, and nothing felt like it was ever getting accomplished. It was almost like the to-do list was this yucky face staring at me with disgust about how I just couldn't get everything done. That is definitely not how we should be feeling about our lives. We should celebrate everything that we get accomplished because as parents, we are superstars. You are a superstar. We get so much more done and we do so many more things on the day-to-day than any person out there who doesn't have kids. And anyone out there who doesn't have kids has no clue how our lives are and how chaotic things can be and how many things can end up on our list, and it just gets exhausting. Well, today I want to talk a little bit about something that you may be very familiar with, a method that has been long talked about since as long as I can remember when I was looking for an answer, but I'm going to turn it on its head a little bit for you. And I think that it may help you to better categorize your tasks, not only quickly, but actually also accomplishing things and feeling really good about it. So the method that I want to bring to our conversation today is the Eisenhower Matrix, the what's important and urgent, what's not important and not urgent, what is possibly important, but we're not really even sure. What do we do? That sound familiar? So if you've never heard of the Eisenhower Matrix or the important urgent quadrant, then let me break it down a little bit, just really quick, and then we're going to dive into how you should actually apply it to your everyday life to get more things done. And then when you do get things done, actually feel good about it too. So let's dive in. So the Eisenhower Matrix was developed by the 34th President of the United States of America, Dwight D. Eisenhower, way back when. And the way that he would manage his everyday tasks is he would create a quadrant. So if you'd like to follow along a little bit about what that may look like, so a quadrant would be the four squares, so one line going down the center of your paper, one line going across to center horizontally, and then the first quadrant would be your important and urgent tasks. The second quadrant would be your important and not urgent tasks. Then at the bottom half of the paper, you would do not important and not important and urgent tasks. And then on the far right corner would be your not important and not urgent tasks. Did I mess that all up? So you've got important stuff on the top, basically. So you've got important stuff on the top half with your urgent and not urgent. And then your bottom half is your not important stuff that's urgent and not urgent. Does that make sense? So once you have that, then you can start writing things down into each quadrant based on how you're feeling about each task. Now, toward the second half of this show, I'm going to tell you something that's a little bit different than the Eisenhower Matrix, at least the way that I do things. So I'll go ahead and get into that in the second part of the show. But first, I wanted to go through step by step a strategy that you can use that'll really bring you some relief in using the Eisenhower Matrix to take your to-do list, shrink it down a whole bunch, and get some clarity. Does that sound good? Okay, so first, before we even look at the matrix, if you're writing your to-do list down, write it down just like you always do. When you have a blank sheet of paper and you go, okay, I know off the top of my head, I've got da-da-da-da-da-da, I've got to do the dishes and the laundry, I've got to take the kids to practice, I have that report to work on for work, etc. Anything that you have on your mind. So basically a brain dump of all the things that you could possibly think of. And I'm talking really wring out your brain. So the reason I love a good brain dump is because I think that what happens is we get super overwhelmed because we aren't really sure what's going on in our brain, and if things start to feel a little scrambled. But if you do a brain dump, now you can see the big picture. And we're not talking about evaluating what's important or not important or not urgent while you're writing these things down. It's without judgment. It's super important to get a brain dump going where you dump all of your tasks and write them down without judgment first. So I've talked about batching things. This is one of those things. If you don't remember that episode or you haven't seen it yet, it's a few episodes back, and I mentioned batching, and we'll talk about it a lot. What batching is that you accomplish the same or similar task all at the same time, and then you move on to the next part. So this is a perfect example of that. So once you get everything down without judgment, then you can go through and decide, okay, is there anything on this list that's super important? It's at the top of my priority list, something that would really mean a lot to me to get done, or would really mean a lot to my kids or my spouse if I accomplish this, or it would really mean a lot to my job. Now you can start assessing what's important. Then what I want you to do is determine what is urgent. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a fire. I feel like so many people talk about the Eisenhower Matrix as, oh, the important and urgent stuff is all the stuff that's an emergency, and there's a fire to be put out. It's all the reactive stuff. Not necessarily. There are plenty of things that can become important and urgent that are just part of everyday life. Dishes, they're not necessarily urgent, but they could be if it's starting to bring you anxiety. Everyone's different. And doing the dishes is something super simple. I mean, that is important just for cleanliness in your home, or having organization and having dishes to eat on the next meal, right? So, I mean, everyone's different. What's important to you, what's urgent to you, what is a fire to be put out. But, I mean, also it could be plenty of day-to-day tasks, things that you need to get done today or within the next 24 hours. That would be considered urgent. Then you have your not urgent. So let's list everything that is not urgent. Go back through the list. There might be things that are very, very important to you that are not urgent, like maybe you want to write a book someday, or you would really love to go to an instructional dance class. It could be anything. It could be anything for your physical body and mind. It could be anything that you would really love to do for your children. Maybe you would really love to go on a nature walk. That's important, but that could be done anytime. But maybe your kids are asking about it, So those kinds of things, it's all up to you on what feels urgent and not urgent, and then go ahead and determine all of those things. Now you have your list, and you have everything that is processed, and it's evaluated as being classified as important, or it's not classified as important, or it's classified as urgent, or it's not classified as urgent. So anything that is not classified as important. So I want you to just not think about those things for a moment. But everything that is important to you that would belong on the top half of that sheet that I was talking about earlier in the show, those are the only things that you're going to focus on. Now, I'm talking about this in terms of writing it on a piece of paper. I am personally a computer girl. I like to put things in a spreadsheet, and then I actually have graduated, if you will, to using an app. So I've been using an app called Todoist for years, and you can get it on your Apple, and you can get it on your iPhone, and you can also get it on your Droid. So it's very, very inexpensive or free. I would highly suggest going ahead and spending the couple dollars a month that it is to use it, because it can really dramatically change the way that you organize your lists. So if you were going to do this in Todoist, for example, you would be able to create a section where there are the important things and the urgent things, and then the not important things or not urgent things you would end up putting away. So that's the next thing that I'm going to tell you to do, is that if you have this written down on a piece of paper, you've established what's important and urgent, or important and not urgent, and you have noted in your list all the things that are not important and not urgent. All the not important, not urgent things, you could actually take those and trash them. Or if you don't feel comfortable with that, tuck them away. And I like to do this too. I actually use Todoist in this way, where I have a someday maybe file. And that's a suggestion that I got from the author of Getting Things Done. David Allen, and he talks a lot about that, the someday maybe file. So that way you don't even have to assess it right now. It's not important to you right now. It's not urgent right now, or it's someone else's request and it's not important and urgent to you. You can just tuck those away or go ahead and tell those people that are at requesting things from you, requesting time from you, tell them no, pass it on, or delegate it to somebody else or suggest somebody else for the job. If you have things like that that are on your list that are just not important to you and not urgent to you in your heart, then get rid of it. That's my suggestion, my 2 cents. But you could also, if you're a paper person, my sister's a big paper person, so I totally understand. And I used to be a big paper person too. So if you're a paper person, I suggest taking all of your unimportant, not urgent stuff, or your things that are just not even established as being important to you, tuck them away and then revisit it next month or in a couple of weeks next time you do a big brain dump of tasks, because you're not going to think about that right now. All you're thinking about is your important urgent stuff and your important not urgent stuff. Okay, so here's where the fun stuff gets we're going to dive into the fun stuff now. I'm really excited because now you've got an organized list that has all of your important things, and you know exactly what's urgent and you know exactly what's not urgent. So obviously the urgent stuff needs your attention first, but there may also be some important and not urgent stuff that is still really important to you that deserves some attention, but you just can't give it as much attention right now. So this is when you go into your calendar and you decide, when do I want to work on these things? You could further categorize your things. Like I said, I love to batch things, so anything that has to do with being on the computer, things that you would tackle while sitting down at your desk, you would categorize those as say you spend 2 hours getting those things done, dedicating this week to those things. And then maybe you have things like, oh, I would really love to take a class that's at the Y, or I want to meditate, or I want to work on my book, or, well, that would be a computer thing, or I want to read, anything that you think you would enjoy going outdoors, or errands that you have that are all in close proximity of each other. Start grouping things together and putting time in your calendar, because I've talked about in the past, if it's not scheduled, it won't happen. So you have to schedule it. You have to schedule the time, set aside some time. Now, as far as the important, not urgent stuff, what I highly suggest, just for your sanity, is knock out as fast as possible all of that important, urgent stuff. Get that established. Maybe pass some of it on to your older kiddos. Maybe you can pass some stuff, get some help from your spouse. Once and for all, start getting some of this stuff off of your plate so that you can clear some of your mental RAM to focus on your important, not urgent stuff. What I would suggest for the week, if you were going to look at all of your hours in the week and you have some dreamy things that are on your important, not urgent list, maybe start small. Dedicate 1 hour of your time to working on those things or on something on that list. And some of those things might be little 10-minute things here and there. Go ahead and do that too. Whatever feels right for you, just treat yourself to an hour to work on the things that are really important to you, but not necessarily screaming at you to get done. Another thing that David Allen recommends that I actually took to heart and it's really helped me is that when I go through my brain dumping process and I start categorizing things that need to get done, I'll go ahead and knock out a lot of the things that are 5 minutes or less. So if something's like, send a quick message to so-and-so, it's like, how did that even get on my to-do list? It's like, that should have been done. But sometimes that happens where I jot down a note to send a quick little message to somebody, and I didn't have a chance in the moment to do it because I was talking to someone else. That kind of thing happens where little tasks get put on your plate and you're like, I want to remember, and I put that in my notes somewhere. So now that I'm in the process of categorizing everything, just like I'm explaining to you, then I'll go ahead and knock that stuff out, and I can get 5, 10 things knocked off my list. Do you have anything on your list that you could do that? Spend 2 to 5 minutes just knocking it out real quick so that it's not even taking up any of your mental RAM. One of the big things that this will liberate you for, that I'm a huge fan of David Allen, so I do highly suggest, even though he's pretty old school and it's a really heavy read that's kind of analytical, and it's a very workbooky type book, but the Getting Things Done book is just so classic and an origin of so many suggested methods of finding sanity and getting things done. But he talks about how your brain is a CRAPPY office. So I'm not going to say it because this is a family-friendly show. You might have the kids in the car. But you know what I'm saying, that your brain can only handle 3 to 4 things at a time that it's processing. So lots of studies have been done. David Allen talks about that a lot, and I've also checked on it. And there are a number of studies that are out there that'll prove that we just can't process too many things. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or anxious, and things are just getting to be too much for you, or your brain's feeling scrambled, and you're feeling so busy all the time, like you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, then really consider taking up the strategy. Like, listen to this episode a few times and find what's best for you. Again, I use Todoist because, I mean, it is just magical. I'll actually do an episode very, very soon about Todoist, because if you're an app person and you enjoy being organized with apps and you're not necessarily a paper person so much, then it might really be a great fit. And even if you are a paper person, it is a really nice spot to just throw a bunch of notes. There's also another thing that I do with it is to track references. So for example, I hear a podcast that I really enjoyed and I'm like, I want to reference that later. That is a really great one. I actually have several resources, like videos that I've run across over the years, or podcasts, articles, things that are really important to me that I really want to put some brain power into digesting and synthesizing. I'll go ahead and put that in my Todoist app so that I can reference it later. And I genuinely do. I actually did it again this week, where I went through and I got a couple things that were really helpful accomplished just from saving articles from a couple years back that have been sitting in my to-do list to explore. So I really encourage you, if you're a consumer of information and you love learning, I mean, of course you love learning because you're here, right? But if you have little nuggets of things that you're like, oh, what was that article that I read? I would have really liked to explore that a little bit more. Then, I mean, you can throw anything into Todoist with links and notes and pictures and all that. So it's just really powerful to track all of the many tasks, and you get it off your brain. You know, we should not have any of those things in our head, because that is where the mental RAM starts to get a little overloaded, and then your energy when you get home at the end of the day is just so zapped, and you don't have anything left for your family. So if you find that, then please consider figuring out a system that's a little bit more organized than just the traditional list. And I would love to hear from you about how that works out for you. It would be really great to hear some success stories about getting your lists categorized. That would be so exciting. But let's see, did I miss anything else? Well, I think that's it. I hope this helps. So you now have a better understanding of how to properly use the Eisenhower Matrix in your life for yourself and work and your family. You also have an idea about an app that you can use and try that way, just a new way of using or organizing to-dos in your life and accomplishing them. And then finally, you have a couple ideas that I shared with you about what to do with the things that are not important or not urgent. So just to touch base a little bit deeper on that, one little caveat to it is I suggested that there's a possibility you could throw those away, or you could save them, like in a file like I do, a someday maybe file, or delete them from your Todoist or your favorite app, or toss it. And you don't have to be afraid of doing that, because if you never think about it again, then it probably really, really wasn't important. If you find that there's something that keeps popping up every time you brain dump, and it keeps showing up over and over again, then that's when you can go, okay, this has shown up in my brain dump 2, 3, 4 times, and maybe it's something I do need to consider as important, and do need to consider as exploring a little bit more to make a decision on it. Or I could realize I'm right, I don't think it's important, and throw it away and officially, and then you can let it go. So I hope that this helps. Thank you so, so much for listening. And if you liked this episode and if you think it's helpful, please do rate us. The 5-star ratings do help the algorithms to share with other parents just like you that our show exists, and it'll really help other parents find it, especially if you found this helpful. Then it would mean so much to a parent out there that's just like you, who may be struggling with some of the same things. So I really appreciate your listening, and I look forward to speaking with you next time.